you have taste in a way that's meaningful to software people.
Hello, I'm Bill Gates.
I would recommend TypeScript.
Yeah, it writes a lot of code for me, and usually it's slightly wrong.
I'm reminded, incidentally, of Rust here.
Rust.
Rust.
This almost makes me happy that I didn't become a supermodel.
Tuber and Nex.
Well, I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about large neural networks. It's really an honor to be here.
Rust.
Data Topics.
Welcome to the Data.
Welcome to the Data Topics podcast. Hello and welcome to Data Topics Unplugged, your casual corner of the web where we discuss what's new in data every week, from EU AI Act to stealing data again. Anything goes. Check us out on YouTube. Leave your comment or question. Feel free to reach out to us. Today is the 4th of February of 2024. My name is Murillo. I'll be hosting you today. Joined as always by Bart.
Hi.
Alex behind the scenes. Hold on. Oh, actually, I didn't know.
Hello.
Okay. She's there. I tried.
Wait, I was trying to show her.
I was trying to show Alex, but anyways, she's there. And we have a very cool special guest returning to the pod, actually. Tim Leers. Can we get an applause for Tim? Do you have the reaction? You don't have the reactions, right, Bart?
No.
Okay. Anyways, hey Tim, how are you?
I am good. Been having an interesting conversation this morning.
Yes, Tim. For people following the video, There we go. Yeah, that's the interest you deserve, Tim.
Thank you.
That's it. Tim was maybe some people know you already because you did have the RootsConf episodes. We did record a short segment there after the RootsConf.
True.
For the people that haven't watched that yet, first of all, come on, man, just watch it. You're missing out. But people that don't know you yet, would you like to give a quick intro?
Sure. So I'm Tim. I'm currently the generative AI lead at DataRoots, which means I help our partners with anything relating to generative AI. Sometimes strategy, sometimes just telling them what works and what doesn't work. Other times implementation. My background is as a psychologist, and somehow I ended up here.
Be careful what you say, Bart. Tim will be watching closely.
Definitely.
Gen AI, it's kind of a hot topic these days, I would say. Maybe we can start there. Well, maybe on AI in general, for the more timely news. The AI Act, I think it went in force. It's the 2nd of Feb.
Yep.
So very, very fresh. As a small recap for people in the AI space, what people need to be mindful of, what changes now?
That's a good question. So I think the most important thing is that unacceptable uses of models are no longer allowed, like models that induce unacceptable risks, such as biometric information collection, emotion recognition, credit scoring. Essentially, all kinds of dystopian scenarios have been outruled by the EU, which, to be fair, is, I think, not a huge issue. Maybe the bigger challenge for companies today that have to start following these new regulations is that they also need to start building an internal catalog of the AI use cases that they have, the models that they use, to be able to, at some point, also prove that they don't have these unacceptable uses, but also be prepared for the upcoming regulations. And I believe, other than that, there are some new regulations relating to literacy, but I don't know the fine-grained details of that, meaning I think there's something relating to the fact that people have to become more literate, AI literate, data literate.
Indeed. And I think this is like a first step of there are different phases of this, right? And I think
this came into effect already like half a year ago, and this is the first set of rules that is now in force.
True.
Indeed.
Okay.
Yeah. Took over me. So I think to be seen there as well, what how that's gonna impact the AI scape. And I think we were discussing a bit before that it already may have impacted Meta's strategy. Am I recalling it wrong? Because I have here
Well,
that
we're hypothesizing that this might be linked, right?
yes, indeed. But it is from yesterday, right? February 3rd. Meta says that it may stop development of AI systems it deems too risky. So again, we're hypothesizing here. We cannot say for sure, but there is a correlation, right?
They don't make like a formal link to the AI Act, but they published or announced a frontier AI framework, which categorizes AI systems into high risk or critical risk, basically based on their potential for, let's say, cyber, chemical, biological attacks, these type of things. So they have a framework to align to, and of course, this sounds very similar to the AI Act framework, where an acceptable risk more or less overlaps with this. So this might also just be a strategy to align and to stay being active on the EU market without saying we're aligning with the EU market.
Yeah, indeed. And yeah, I think it's interesting. Well, maybe for people not as much in the field, I think AI lately has been used a lot interchangeably with Gen AI, right?
True.
LLMs. I think Meta also announced that they wanted to replace engineers with AI systems, like mid-level engineers. So just to make a bit of distinction, as I understand here, and maybe Bart, correct me if I'm wrong, like they are investing heavily on the Gen AI part, but then the more AI is like artificial intelligence, the umbrella thing, they're having this categorization and stopping, or they're paying close attention to stop the critical risk and all these things, right?
And it's also like the article hints also a bit that it's a response on some criticism that a US adversary used their open source model, and they're not very clear on what, but probably they're hinting towards DeepSeek, and that they also like this is also a bit of a response to these comments, like you're opening everything up, but what about the risk of this?
But can you say that? Can you repeat that again? Like you said that Meta claims that in the EU they used.
No. So there is some. This is not linked to the EU, but
Okay.
there is some comments towards Meta that a US adversary used Llama basically to build their own models, build potentially high risk models. The article is not very clear on which, but I think they're hinting towards DeepSeek there, where there are some rumors that Llama was used. Which of course that they don't have. The US doesn't have any control on this. It's a whole debacle at the moment. So there's also, like, next to the EU, we've also that's running in parallel.
Indeed. Maybe also, I think it follows a bit that line, right? That OpenAI, they're a bit hurt in a way that they were upset that apparently DeepSeek used ChatGPT's data, right? I think I saw some screenshots like that in DeepSeek responses it mentions ChatGPT, for example. And I think the OpenAI was taking legal action or something, right? Which, first of all, it's a bit ironic because they were the first ones to use all copyrighted data to train their models, and they didn't care at all, and they really kind of got away with it. But now, yeah, and I think the counter argument is there's so much ChatGPT generated content today in the internet that it is possible that someone just used ChatGPT, put it on their website, and DeepSeek actually scraped the website, right? That had some mentions. So it's
a very convenient excuse, but yeah, it
is true.
We're out of low background tokens, let's say, like all of the content is now contaminated indeed.
Yes. And then and I think that, as I understand that, and I'm looking at both of you here, that this led to this news that Sam Altman, OpenAI has been in the wrong side of history concerning open source. No, not this one.
No, there's another article. Like I think there's
This one?
OpenAI is butthurt that DeepSeek used their data. I think what it comes down to is that there is some quote unquote significant proof that they use a distilled version of the model, basically like running questions or sentences to their model and using the responses of that. I mean, I think we can all agree that's super hypocritical. Huh?
Yeah.
OpenAI just scraped everything off the internet, like with a big middle finger to copyright, and big fuck you to copyright.
Yeah,
we can't call it that. Yeah.
And now they're butthurt that someone used the output of the model to build something.
Yeah.
I mean,
you can't steal our stolen data, basically.
Yeah. This is the news, right? Like David Sachs claims that there's substantial evidence that DeepSeek use OpenAI's models to train its own.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the evidence is not like they don't explain anything else. They don't give any more details.
And it's also so there is, and you can actually trigger it. I tried it a few times. So if you ask DeepSeek, like I don't know the exact sentence anymore, it was floating around on Reddit, like who built you, or what are you, what is your name, something like that, then it will explain that it's either ChatGPT by OpenAI, but it also answers that it is Claude.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it probably it used both, right?
They're equally stealing from everyone. So,
But Claude didn't, like Anthropic didn't.
well, Anthropic is kind of pushing back, right? Like
Yeah.
they're trying to more go through the regulatory capture side of things, trying to impose tariffs, laws to prevent DeepSeek from growing bigger or other competitors from popping up. So they're doing it as well, just in a different way.
I see. Yeah. You know, we have a saying in Brazil, like ladrão que rouba ladrão tem 100 anos de perdão, which translates to like a thief who robs another thief. A thief has 100 years of forgiveness. So it's like when you say like you're getting butthurt of this, it's like basically if you steal something I steal from you, it's like you know, it's
exactly.
So DeepSeek is Robin Hood.
Exactly, something like that. Yeah, in Brazil, this wouldn't stick because we have a saying for that, so no one would care. But yeah, maybe more on DeepSeek, and I think he made a lot of noise. I think we're still recovering from all the shock and all these things, right? And I see here DeepSeek, the countries and agencies that have banned the AI company's tech. What is this about, Bart?
Well, the list of countries or government agencies that basically took a more or less formal stance on the usage of DeepSeek, and the formal stance can also just be an advice. And I think it's, to be honest, like I think it's a normal advice. I think this is very much linked to the big hype around DeepSeek.
Yeah,
because I think there are tons of open source models that you can make these concerns about, where you have a new application that is being used a lot, where people send a lot of personal data, but we're not really clear on what are the terms and conditions under what country's law are we enforcing these terms and conditions. I think all of that is still very unclear with DeepSeek, and that countries and especially government agencies are saying let's not use this for now. Seems fair, right?
Yeah.
What about cases where you roll your own DeepSeek deployment? Like you're not using whatever DeepSeek's API, but you use just their model weights. Do you think that's okay to do?
Well, personally, I think that's... Well, I mean, again, I would think yes, until I have a good enough reason to think not, right? Like if you have the models, you have your own instance, you know, you have control of what's going in and out. I think that's probably the approach I would recommend. Like even for companies, you can host your own private API.
I feel like we're evolving to a model where we choose our bias. Like either we get the China bias or the US bias or another country's bias, and you just maybe in some point in the future combine all biases together, and maybe you get something resembling.
Yeah,
the proper answer.
True. I think but I think I also noticed like some models are better for some things, like generating text. Like I even had we were drafting an email to send out, and I used Gemini, Claude, and OpenAI's model to kind of see the tone of voice.
Mm-hmm.
And you do get a few differences. I remember the RootsConf as well. We talked to Sophie, and it's bad that I forget the name. Sophie and Water. Yeah. We talked to them about the LLM Hunger Games. So they also talked a bit like how like OpenAI was kind of self-promoting more. Like that's as the leader and stuff. So I think it almost feels like they have their own personalities, which I also think it's funny. Yeah, I think indeed, but I agree with you, Bart. Like this is more because of the DeepSeek hype. I think this could have happened. I mean, I don't know also if the fact that it's from China, if people are a bit more...
Well, yeah, it helps. It adds to the bias, of course. Huh?
I think important context here is that EU and US do have agreements on how data can be used, whereas maybe China and EU don't have that
and up to a few weeks ago, we actually believed that we could trust these agreements.
Exactly. That's the next challenge
because
there. Because
I honestly think like the whole start of the trade wars, like this will change our bias as well. Like where before, I think we were very much aligned with these US statements, because the US and EU are very close. The US, like the last weeks, is becoming a bit of an island.
The US?
They're saying, fuck everybody around us.
Mm.
If you don't do what we do. Like, I mean, this type of like even like GDPR, the AI Act, we can't really trust them to uphold it.
Well, but I think also with Trump taking office, also he backpedaled on some of these decisions. No.
Well, on a lot of things, right?
Yeah,
that are very, let's say, like there was an AI executive order that should start building a regulatory framework around AI in the US that is cancelled. Like there's a completely standstill or a withdrawal from regulations on this, like which is very much the counter position that the EU is taking on this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions I have for the future because Vance, the VP, was essentially backed by Peter Thiel, so a very, very wealthy billionaire who backs a lot of tech companies as well. And Vance was a vocal proponent of little tech, meaning increasing competition, reducing regulations so that little tech, smaller companies, not so the established big giants like Google, Amazon, Meta, etc. So these smaller companies can compete with them. But now we're seeing also the contrary happening a little bit indeed, that there is policy on demand for big tech companies. And that's also probably why we've seen all of these, flips in certain policies, let's say, inside Meta, for example. And so it's kind of indeed confusing what's going to happen. Is this going to be good for little tech in the US, in Europe? Are we going to lose access to the compute resources in the US, which we actually do kind of need probably to keep things running?
Also, that's a question I have. Like you mentioned little tech, and I agree like with the idea, with the principle, with the, but also, do you think it's actually feasible with for like Gen AI, like large language models and all these things, the costs? Because like even now to say a model is large means very different things from 3 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And I'm also wondering, like, universities where a lot of the research came out, like how much can they actually compete realistically?
Maybe it's a good segue to the article we have on the EU investments in AI factories. This is an article that is already a little bit older. I think it's news from a month ago. Marilo's trying to find it.
Yes, so sometimes it takes a while. This one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what the EU is trying to do is to make 1.5 billion available to build European AI factories. The exact number is not completely clear yet. They're talking about 7. I know a bit the plans for the Netherlands, for example, as well. They're betting on, that's why how I understand that this will be used, it will be 50-50. So the EU will support with 50% of the cost. The country will also carry to 50% of the cost. So the Netherlands, now the latest news is that the Netherlands will invest anywhere between 150 and 300 million, which will be doubled by the EU then. Which seems significant, with the plans in the Netherlands, at least, that they want to build 1 to 3 factories. Probably with a certain expertise in a certain field, like for example in health, they have a dedicated factory to this. What we're of course, like the elephant in the room is that 1.5 billion is a lot.
Yeah,
but it dwarfs in comparison to anything that's OpenAI or Anthropic or.
Yeah, I think also because this is not as new, like it's from December, right? But if you look at more recent news in the US with the Project Stargate, it was how much?
Allegedly, it was about 500 million, so 500 million.
500 million?
Oh wait, maybe sorry, I'm wrong. It's actually 500 billion.
Yeah,
right?
I think so.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Sorry, my
but like the numbers are crazy.
Sense.
But like the numbers are crazy big, But like I think it's like
it's more of a press release, I think, at this point.
Yeah, indeed. I also think that the news of that and then DeepSeek and.
But still, even if they only manage 1/4 of that,
that is true. It's a lot.
Like it completely like this is completely dwarfed by it, and this doesn't even take into account everything that was already done. Right. That is,
indeed, indeed.
And that brings a bit the question, like what can we even do, right? And I think that is also what makes people hopeful around what we see with DeepSeek.
Yeah.
even though also there's a lot of discussion like how much did it actually cost to train it, but there it seems that it was cheaper and more efficient to both train and use, right?
Yeah, but I think again, even if DeepSeek was more expensive than what they claimed, I also like even if it's double, it's still less than you would expect, because I think the numbers in the millions, right? It was like a couple hundred millions.
Less.
Well, what they're saying
Allegedly.
V3 was trained for 5.5 million, but I think that.
But like let's imagine like R1. How much did he say any numbers on R1? I thought it was like a couple hundred million.
I don't know. There's a lot of rumors and
there's a lot of rumors.
How many GPUs they actually have.
It claimed its R1 model costed less than $6 million, but what they're not counting in here is the cost of optimizing the cluster in such a specific way, and all of course the research time that went into that. So I mean, there's obviously a lot of other costs, even if this is true, but it's still.
But even if it's like,
impressive.
even if it's tenfold,
Exactly.
100-fold, right?
Exactly.
Like it's still like even if the numbers are wrong, even if you extrapolate, it's still like it means something still.
Exactly. The impressive thing is that they did this with a huge handicap in the hardware that they had access to. So they had to basically redesign hardware to actually make this possible, and that's the big deal here. And I feel like the EU, indeed, like one of the stances is let's just wait and see and hope that, these models, they can run on increasingly less hardware and we can just run it on our laptops at some point.
I do think reading this, I do think it's good because I feel like it shows some concern or attention to this. I don't know if it's enough, indeed. But I also think, like, for example, you mentioned like healthcare or maybe like the periphery of like maybe the general ChatGPT kind of things, we won't compete, but maybe for more specialized things, maybe I don't know how good ChatGPT is for other languages, for example. I'm not sure, but I feel like maybe for more niche things, I think this definitely has an impact.
But that's the thing, right? Like if you're an engineer at a company, whether it's public or private sector, you're going to want to build something. And today, the easiest way to build that is with these large private language models. Up until maybe DeepSeek was a thing. Maybe that will change now for a bit. Indeed, a good thing that you point out is like languages. That's something that is today a bit of a tension because all of these big models, they do well, but maybe not well enough to capture all of the nuances of every language, especially low research languages like Dutch or other low research languages.
Yeah, I think if you think of EU, I think that's more. It's that like clear, like the contrast between US and EU, right? The amount of languages there in the EU, the people that you're trying to accommodate, I think there's definitely.
I think that what we see the evolution and that's very much thanks to the open source ish world around LLMs is that there is potential with more limited budgets to build these more smaller niche expertise models. Yeah. I think that is that's the thing to be hopeful for.
Yeah, indeed. And
I'm personally a bit more skeptical on big EU investments because what we've seen in the past, also with other kinds of investment like Gaia, where the idea was to build a big cloud offering, like it gets distributed over so many entities in the EU, and then after 5 years, you question like what actually even happened with this big amount.
Like it gets diluted.
It gets diluted.
It's like there's a huge coordination cost that you pay, and oftentimes it also ends up more in academic institutions, which is not bad per se, but it's not enough to allow it to be flowing back through private sector. And if we just look at the numbers, I mean, private sector US AI investment dwarfs EU's. It's just really hard to compete on that level. But also, and one important thing that we maybe haven't touched upon is talent. Building a cluster and engineering it in such a way that it can be much more efficient, that's not common knowledge, and building that talent, keeping it in Europe is also a huge challenge, which you need a private sector for to sustain realistically in our capitalistic system these days.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think there are a lot of very talented people in the EU. I think a lot of the stuff that came, like even from the Netherlands we're talking about here, like a lot of this, like Python, a lot of like these very things that really change the way we do things comes from the EU. But I also agree with you that I do see a lot of attractives for people to move to the US for these things.
Well, if there is no ecosystem to do these things, even though you
Indeed.
have the right education, right certifications to
Yeah.
do this, like if there's no ecosystem to do it, you move, right? And the ecosystem in the EU today is very small. Huh?
Yeah,
Like the only company making sometimes a small wave is Mistral, and that's about it. Huh?
yeah, indeed, indeed. But yeah, I do think and I'm also saying this because with the DeepSeek news, Anthropic also, the CEO of Anthropic, he reacted to this, kind of saying there need to be more sanctions in the in the Chinese market for the chips from NVIDIA. I also heard from someone from Hugging Face on LinkedIn that they were very vocal against it because they said that Hugging Face, the whole idea is about open source AI, that this is what moves the things forward. So it's like to really handicap a competitor because they're doing well, because it really goes against what we should want as a society. Because indeed, like even the DeepSeek, again, there are a lot of question marks, but they did publish a paper that did try to express a bit more their strategies. And what we see with a lot of these big players is that they're actually doing the opposite, which actually leads me to the next point that I didn't bring. I mean, I think it leads to my next point because I didn't put this article there. That OpenAI, Sam Altman says that OpenAI has been on the quote unquote wrong side of history concerning open source. And I think the big thing here, this is the perspective that I bring without not having read this article, that OpenAI was originally supposed to be open. They gradually became less and less open with time. And I think kind of recently they also made some legal moves to be a for-profit company, right? But yeah, what is this about, Bart?
Well, I think that a lot of this links back to an AMA that they did on Reddit, where they got some questions on what OpenAI stands on open source, debating a bit like is this good, is this bad, and I think the comment of OpenAI is also a bit on because of all the DeepSeek evolutions, like has been, maybe we need to reevaluate our stance on open source, and maybe we need to be a bit more open source oriented because we see that open source really speeds up innovation, and perhaps if we should have done this, we would have been further along. I think that's a bit the gist of it. I think it's a nice thing to say for questions about it, right? Like, not sure what it will actually bring in terms of them becoming more open source.
So he said that, like, this is from.
Not sure if he said it
January
himself,
31st. But that's the vibe.
The AMA of
But the vibe is that OpenAI wants to be more open again.
Well, if it brings money, that's the essence of the question, the point here, because Sam Altman is not focused on safety or on AGI. He's turning it into a for-profit company. That's part of it.
Yeah.
And most of the product directions that we've seen, there are still some interesting research ones towards AGI, sure, or towards safety, but a lot of it is about bringing in money, bringing in the dough.
Yeah. I see.
And so what we're finding now is that maybe the moat that US companies thought they had in hardware, in talent, in being ahead technologically on the application or software layer side wasn't as defensible as they thought it was. And so actually the reality is that 2 years ago, we had this huge realization that if we just throw enough compute at these models, that we can build really new types of things. And we're still coming to grips with what they can do 2 years later. And we haven't explored even like a fraction of that. So we're all still pioneering how we can use generative AI, which means that it's also a bit, it's obvious that open source is going to win on some domains because there's just more people trying different things that hopefully will win. And maybe because of DeepSeek now, there's enough sentiment on the corporate side of things to support that move.
So the idea here is like, we are for profit. We're not backing on that. But maybe being open source can also help us.
I think they're playing like multiple games here because also Sam is saying to reach AGI, we need 500 billion. Like, it's just, how can we get more money?
But I think more money is not, I mean, like all of the other companies are for profits. Huh? Like there's just a legacy that they started as a research institution and then now they're moving towards a for-profit organization, and there's a lot of debate on it because, like you said, you were open, blah blah blah. But like all of the other companies were not even debating like this is not good that it's for-profit. Like that to me, that's a bit hypocritical to challenge them on being a for-profit.
I think the issue with the OpenAI, because indeed you don't hear that about Anthropic or all the other for-profit companies. I think the issue with OpenAI is because, well, one, I think Elon Musk is invested and he makes a lot of noise about everything. So I think that's why he gets a lot of attention. But I also feel like the feeling that you get a bit cheated on, like someone says, "Hey, give me money because I want to develop like forward society as a whole." Right? And he said, "Okay, yeah, that's a good cause. I believe in that. I'll give you money." And then you say, "But actually, no. I mean, all these things that I built now, I'm gonna like no. Now it's for like you kind of. It's almost like you invest in open source. Like I think maybe the HashiCorp thing, them changing the license, is a bit of a similar sentiment. You invest your time, you believe in this, and then when they're in the right to do it. I think no one says that it's wrong, but I think there's a feeling that you feel a bit cheated. And I think that's why OpenAI was a bigger issue.
To me, it's hard to make a parallel with HashiCorp. With HashiCorp, the difference was that you had tons and tons of community contributors that, together with HashiCorp, built the product.
That is true. No, I think it's a different type of investment. Here, right? But I think if it was money, right? If I don't know. Again, I didn't invest in OpenAI.
But to me, like there's it's very you can debate this in every direction, right? But to me, if you say want a forward society, if AGI plays a part in that, a question mark, right? We don't know what it brings. I mean, to get there, I think we all agree a lot of investment is needed.
Agreed.
I mean, today the only proof that we have, and even that is debated, like we can only build better models with more resources.
Yes.
And we're trying to get, we're reaching the limits there, but I mean that there is more money needed for this. Like it's also not really.
I think it's a fair assumption that more money will lead to better models. That's probably true at this point in time.
And but before, but to have people invest in this, they're not gonna the amount of money that is needed. People are not gonna put it in a non-profit.
Sure, that's fair. And
yeah, but
I'm not disagreeing with that. And I think being for profit is fine. I think indeed some parts of what Marilis mentioned is valid, but also why OpenAI? The actual founding team, the people that were working on this direction, they've mostly left. They're after their own ventures.
But to me, OpenAI as a research organization is completely different than the company is today. Yeah?
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
That's the legacy. It's a completely different company. Yeah. I fully agree with that.
Yeah.
And if you say OpenAI should stand for what it started with, then there's something wrong. I also fully agree with that.
No, but I see what you're saying.
That feels like the norms and values that they had in the beginning are not part of their norms and values today.
Which I also think, and again, to be clear, I think it's also fine. I don't think it's if the world circumstances change and they felt like they need to change. I also I agree with your point as well that I think the way that the world works, if people don't just give so much money without expecting anything in return, right? So I think it's I understand things change, the mechanics change. World today is not the same world that was 5 years ago as well, right? Yeah. So I understand that. I think and
then it brings us maybe a bit back to the competitive climate. If you want to get to AGI, then a climate where there are no regulations whatsoever to think about is much easier to experiment in, right?
Yeah.
Yes, that's a wonderful
whether or not that is good for society.
Yes.
Whether or not that is good for society is something completely different, right?
Yeah, indeed.
But I don't think the complete deregulation of everything around AI in the US, it does not improve our competitiveness.
No, but I think that's the tension a bit, right? On one hand is if you say everyone do whatever they want, they're gonna go further, right? But at the same time, is do you I think there are few things that we feel we should worry about. We should worry about data privacy. We should worry about responsibly handling the data. But at the same time, if one person says, "Yeah, F this," I'm just gonna go get ahead.
That's the difficult thing, yeah. Exactly.
And then it's oh yeah, I value these things, but I'm falling behind.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
It's almost like I think of the environmental impact parallels with this, right? You can add policies and all these things, but then if someone says, "Oh, F this," I'm gonna keep burning petrol to then there's a lot of problems you don't have because of this, and maybe you're gonna fall behind. And how do you balance these things? And I feel as long as everyone, I think you actually talked to me about this. What was the name of the monkey? No, what was the I forgot.
Monkey?
No, it wasn't a parallel. What was that? A paradox or something?
Dilemma.
Maybe the prisoner's dilemma.
Sure if it completely applies here, but
I think it's more as long as we all kind of agree and we're all on the same page, it's fine, right? But as soon as one person kind of breaks that that pattern.
Exactly.
It's
What do
just
you
like
do
tick,
then?
exactly. They
Do you want
you
to be
do.
left behind, or and
Exactly.
what is left behind on what aspects, right?
Exactly.
Because it is competitive to on AI performance, but maybe you're better on society.
I think let's say that we look at AI like electricity. Let's say that we didn't try to do everything to bring electricity to Europe, and meanwhile the rest of the world is using electricity. That means that you're at a huge competitive disadvantage because you can't be as productive. And I think the same is somewhat true for AI today, in a sense that Europe is facing an existential risk by not creating maybe the necessary conditions for AI ecosystem to develop here. And that's maybe a bit of a strong statement. Maybe it's not so much about deregulating everything, but also about creating regulatory certainty, which is something that is very difficult today. I work with quite a few partners that say that they want to invest in certain AI things, but they're not sure if they can today because they don't know how EU is going to flip its stance. For example, on copyrighted stuff. What about generated content and things like this? So there's an element of overregulation, perhaps, on some elements that cause investment from the private sector to be reduced or whatnot. But there's also regulatory uncertainty that is one of the challenges, which is where actually in the past, EU did a pretty good job when it comes to like data and privacy regulations. Pretty good. There were some downsides, but the rest of the world basically modeled themselves after that.
Yeah, I agree. I think with the AI stuff, I think it's a bit also new, and I think new in like different senses, right? And I think it's also a bit hard for people to really think through what is the actual impact. And
But I think the parallel that Tim is making with electricity, I think is a fair one. I think the AI is the new electricity.
yeah,
And to paraphrase Reid Hoffman a bit, is that electricity brought us super agency, in a sense that because of electricity, you can work late in the evening. Because of electricity, I drive around with my car. Like it enables a lot of things that I couldn't do before.
yeah,
Right. And if the EU today would not have electricity or a very limited amount, we would be a third world continent,
indeed,
right?
for sure.
And I think that the same like fundamental shift will happen with AI.
I think so too.
The question is a bit, what is the timeline on that, right?
Yes, I agree. And I think I also see that there is a reason why the regulations in the EU are there, right? And I think that's the thing. Like if there was a very strong penalty to having electricity, then you also need to weigh and balance things, right? And I think to be seen how everything's going to play out, right? Like I think it's not just depending on the EU and the minds in the EU. I think indeed you need to look around the players around you and see what they're doing, and you need to make compromises, I guess.
Definitely. But today we are running behind very much on the rest of the world when it comes to critical AI infrastructure, talent, money in the sector, competitive climate. And I think there is definitely a path that we can walk, which balances people's democratic values, making sure that citizens are safe and protected from nefarious use. I think the EU AI Act being enforced for unacceptable systems is an example of that. Like not a single industry is going to be hugely impacted by that, except the ones that we don't want anyways, and that won't strengthen EU.
Yeah.
So I think there's a path that we can walk, but I don't think we've been walking that decisively enough at this point.
Yeah, I also think in the EU, again, I wasn't born in the EU. I'm not the most versed in the EU, but I also feel like there's a bit of a, like even with the investments, right? I think we try to promote equality by like splitting the pie equally. But I also feel like for these things, sometimes if you split the pie equal, like if you have one pie for 100 people and you slice it equally, everyone's still hungry, right? You see what I'm saying? Because I feel like I think in the US you have companies that can do these things because it's very concentrated, right?
That's
and
true.
I think a bit I'm also wondering if this approach for AI investments will also hold, because you cannot, if you have 1.5 billion and you split it across everyone, what do you actually have at the end, right? So yeah, I'm not criticizing by any means, just to be clear. I don't have a better solution. I think it's a really tough problem.
True.
Right. And I think the way that we've been thinking up until now and what worked until now may not work in the next 5 to 10 years when it comes to AI.
Definitely.
I know, Tim, you have to go in a bit, but we talked about AI. We talked about OpenAI. And there was O3 as well that was announced a little while ago. And you have told that you've played with it.
Yes.
I want to get a bit before you go, I wanted to hear about your vibe check on the
Sorry, I just love how we went from like this zoom in on OpenAI to practices, and then like let's use its products. Right
Yeah,
now.
let's do
check
it.
out. Like,
But it's fun.
yeah, it's so much fun.
But it's so cool.
No, in all seriousness, the real-time voice mode of OpenAI has been, I think, by far the best voice assistant experience for the last few months. I've used it extensively, you know, to do things on the go, to write notes down, things that are in my head, organize things, and so forth. And now the video mode, so the I don't know what you call it. I think it's video mode.
Yes.
It's combined with real-time voice, so I can just point it at you and ask it, "Who's this?" I'm just gonna let it speak.
That's great to hear.
Okay.
They've been
Fantastic, great. Okay, let's just zoom in on what's above Murillo. What do you see here?
above him. There's a big pixel art piece of a rubber duck on the wall. It's quite unique and fun.
What about him? Do you think he could be someone famous?
I can't tell if he's famous just by looking, but he seems friendly and relaxed.
Okay. So I've mainly used this.
But is this part of O3 specifically?
No, it's not part of O3.
Okay.
O3 is, I think you cannot use it with the real-time voice modes. Yeah, so I think you can only use...
So O3 is its new reasoning model, right? Like
Yes.
an iteration on O1, basically.
Yes. Yes.
This
I use
Crypto
O3 Mini.
So O3 doesn't support the audio mode, but
Okay.
I haven't actually noticed a big difference or big improvement using O3 so far.
Okay.
It seems more
But
or
you
less
used
the same
O1.
as O1. Yeah.
Okay.
But I also
Maybe-
didn't like O1 that much compared to Cloud Sonnet 3.5.
But maybe like it needs to be very niche. Maybe I think maybe you'll feel a difference when you try stuff with O1 and then it fails and then you try with O3 and it works. But I
That's
think
the
it's a
thing.
bit, you need to find the task for it, I guess.
One thing that worked very well in using O3 versus Cloud Sonnet is that you can give it more or less like a set of big instructions, some context, and then it will deliver a first good draft that is much more long and comprehensive than, for example, Cloud 3.5 Sonnet. Cloud 3.5 Sonnet on a, let's say, smaller scale delivers better information, insights, but doesn't do well over a very long context. Like it's not good at generating a large document. And so that's what I've been using O1 for, but I haven't noticed a difference in O3 so far. In fact, so far it seemed worse, but it's probably because I haven't figured out the right words exactly to use, you know?
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. I actually had access recently to O3 Mini. I haven't played enough with it, but it was more like, hey, I have this markdown file. Can you create a table from this list of things? And it did a good job, but not sure if O1 would have done a much worse job.
That's the thing. Like, I feel like we're constantly getting better models nowadays, but what is better when the point is just to get the right answer? Like, you can't necessarily get better at that.
Indeed. But maybe one last thing. Also, my brother, he had also the video thing, and we were playing around a bit with it. And one thing I thought was pretty fun because like they don't just answer. For example, we had just eaten lunch, and then it was like, "What is this?" And then it's like, "Oh, it looks like you just had a snack. Have a good snack." You know, like kind of gives you like a little. It's like a little person. It's like, "Oh, bon appetit," you know, kind of thing. You know, which is not just like your dull quote unquote model or like I don't know. Like you asked before, like we did this little experiment before as well. Like, is this person famous? And it says, I cannot say this person's famous. Like, do you think he could be famous? It's like, well, he has a big smile, you know. So who knows, you know? So I thought like it's a little really fun touch that it brings to it as well. But in any case, I think we need to call it because Tim is a very busy guy, very important busy guy. So he has unfortunately we have to call it. And I think we could talk with Tim for hours longer here. So we'll just leave it at that. Anyone else has anything to add? Say anything you wanna shout out? No.
It was fun.
Next time we talk about something else than just
It's every week we
LLMs.
say that, but we'll try.
But just what? Sorry?
LLMs.
LLMs. You talk about LLMs every week?
Yeah, it's a bit hard not
like
to.
the
huh?
news is like 99% LLMs.
Yeah, I mean, yes, generated by and about, yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
but I think also like last week there was DeepSeek and stuff. So it's like if
Yeah.
you're not talking about DeepSeek is not an option, right? So it's like it's
Exactly.
a bit there was the AI Act now, so I think
I'd love to talk about search sometime, actually.
Oh, that's cool.
Search.
Okay, the
I
next
think
time
that's-
we'll write it down on our calendar next time
All
for
right,
sure.
and I'll bring a topic this time.
Yes, and they'll have all the topics there.
Yeah.
All right, thanks y'all.
Thanks a lot, Tim. Thanks a lot
Bye.
to our listeners.
Thanks a lot, Alex.
See you next time.
You have taste in a way that's meaningful to software people.
Hello, I'm Bill Gates.
I would recommend TypeScript.
Yeah, it writes a lot of code for me, and usually it's slightly wrong.
I'm reminded incidentally of us here.
Thus, this almost makes me happy that I didn't become a supermodel.
Cooper and Ness.
Boy, I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about large neural networks. It's really an honor to be here.
Thus,
Data Topics.
Welcome to the data.
Welcome to the Data Topics podcast.
Joe!